Okay. Good afternoon. I wanted to welcome you to the basics of composting, but before that, I want to give a couple of commercials for the Master Gardener program. We are relocated from the little white building in Paynesville, if you're familiar with that. It was right across from the jail. We loved that building. It was a great place. They said, no, we've got to have you move. It's going to be imploded, and we're going to build a new jail. It's still standing. That was 5 years ago. So we're so upset that we lost our little building. But we are now in the Lake County building offices in the old commissioners area. And it's just a little harder to get to. But if you ever need soil testing or want to bring in a sample or anything like that, this is where you would go to take it. You can call them at the number there and get information. And there is a helpline. It's live April through October. And on Tuesdays from 9 to 11, they will also answer questions if you have to leave them a voicemail because you're just not available 9 to 11 on Tuesdays. So, and it is manned that way. The voicemail part of it is manned year round, but a real live person is answering the phone 9 to 11, April through October on Tuesdays. That's our email. If you need to send us anything, you can send a picture of a problem you're having to that email. And you can just check us out at lake.osu.edu. And that's our website. I was talking before about a program that we have March through November. It's this coming year in 2024. It will be the first Saturday of every month, March through November. And it's timely garden information things. The first one is on postage stamp gardening. And we end with cleaning up your garden. So, and there is, or putting your garden to bed, but there's also waking your garden up is in the early part, would talk about flowers that kind of come alive in moonlight. So it's a different kind of gardening scheme. So the brochure is just now being delivered to my house in about 2 hours. So we will get some out to the library so they'll have the information for you. So, and I have been a master gardener from 2008. I retired from the Lubrizol Corporation in 2007 in June. And by January, I was enrolled in the Master Gardener program and became a Master Gardener in 2008. So I've been around for a little while and I love talking about things. Composting was one of my first ones. Orchids is another one. There's a whole range of topics. So it's just fun. And the one thing about me is I have a passion for gardening. I have a passion for orchids. I also have a passion for teaching. And so when I found out I could do gardening and teaching in the same organization when I retired, I said, hallelujah, we found our niche. So enough about me and our program. Let's move on. I'm going to talk about why in the world would you want to compost, what you can and cannot compost. You can't just throw everything into the pot and hope that it's going to work. I'm going to talk a little bit about the science behind composting because I think that helps you understand why you have to do it the way you have to do it. There is a real science behind it. And also, then once you've got it, what do you do with it? And some of the different methods for composting. And then, of course, there'll be a very, very short summary. Composting really is a great way to get rid of yard trimmings and kitchen waste without putting it in the landfill. Some communities you have to pay to have your trash picked up, so it's cheaper. Doesn't cost you a penny. And it's also improves your soil and it improves the plants that you plant in that soil. And so even if you just have a kitchen where you've got some kitchen scraps or you've even just got a few window boxes, you really have the raw material for making compost. It just means you have a smaller one if you don't have a lot of input. And you also have a use for the compost if you've got any kind of a plant around. Now, what do we mean by composting basics? Well, the organisms are being, the yard waste and the kitchen scraps are being returned to the soil. They are being remade, if you will. They are going to create an environment in your soil of healthy plant-sustaining microorganisms. The highest level, the ones that you would actually see and know, are the earthworms. They are part of the composting world, but there are lots of much, much smaller microorganisms that are down there helping to improve your soil. Once you start using compost, you'll see that you have a huge increase in the number of earthworms that you've got. If you dig a hole in the soil that hasn't been used to having compost introduced to it, you might find one or two. I dig up mine, and I could go fishing because there are so many earthworms in my soil. What it's going to do to heavy clay, because Lake County has, in some pockets, has really, really good loam soil. That's where the nurseries were, because they were improving their soil so that they could raise good plants that they could sell. But where you didn't have a nursery, you probably either have sand or most likely clay. Really heavy, dense, nothing is going to grow in its soil. First time I planted carrots, they grew out of the ground. Literally grew out of the ground, not down in the ground. Now they grow down in the ground because I've improved my clay soil. It will also help sandy soils to retain the moisture that's needed to sustain your plants. Soil that is primarily sand is just going to lose all the moisture. You're going to water it, it's going to straight through, and it's not going to be enough for the roots to hold on to. And it will add essential nutrients to any soil. So if you want to improve your plant health, improve your soil. And healthy plants are going to need clean air. Healthy plants help to clean the air, and it conserves your soil, and it's going to give you curb appeal if you're worried about what your house looks like if you're planning on selling it. About 20 to 30% of all household waste is kitchen scraps and yard trimmings. And that's kind of scary because we don't have a lot of places to put landfill. And so if we're going to clog it up with stuff that could be used elsewhere, why do that? And if you dump your grass clippings into your those brown bags that you see along the side of the road when people are cleaning up, okay? Well, if you put your grass clippings in there and then they go to an incinerator or a compost facility, it lessens the efficiency of those systems because they're so dense, and so they cling together, and they've got a lot of water, and you know what it looks like if you just leave clippings on the lawn. They get all mushed together and slimy. Yeah, well, that's not a good thing to have happen. So it's got very high moisture. You don't want to be bagging your grass clippings. Actually, we recommend that you just let them stay as long as you're not taking grass this high and cutting it down and then leaving this huge amount of grass on your lawn. If you use fertilizers, for example, it puts the fertilizers back into your lawn because those grass clippings go down to the soil and continue to fertilize. Composting is also going to help reduce the need for those chemical fertilizers and pesticides. So what can you? Well, I've already said yard trimmings. Okay. And so that's thatch, it's weeds, as long as they aren't diseased. And any garden plants that you pull out at the end of the season, you can throw them in as long as there's no disease attached to them. Any ground brush, in fact, when we get to making compost, you're going to want to have some ground brush to put at the bottom of your pile because that lets the air come into your compost pile. Kitchen scraps, fruits, vegetables, eggshells, coffee grounds, you name it. We'll talk about what not to. But if you're going to use eggshells, always crunch them up. We're going to talk about the microorganisms for a bit. But if you don't crumple them up, then you've got this hard shell that these little microorganisms can't do anything with, can't get to it. But if you crumple them all up, you get all these little bits and pieces that they just love to munch on. Coffee grounds are perfect for composting. I don't know if Starbucks still does it, but the one that used to be up on the corner of Chillicothe and Mentor Avenue, they have a bin of their coffee grounds. And you could just, I walked in and I looked and it said, free, take some. And I went, really? Can I? Take as many as you want. So I grabbed those things and ran off to my compost pile because it's perfect stuff for it. What don't you compost? Excuse me. Disease or infested plants. I talked about that. And you don't put meat or bones or any fatty foods like cheeses and stuff. That does not work in a compost pile. And you don't compost pest waste. Any idea why? Why would you not compost pest waste? Well, the answer was parasites. That's one reason, but there's another very basic one. What do you feed your cats and dogs? Meat products. So you don't want to put the results of their eating into the compost pile because you're just putting in fatty foods and meat. What about chickens? Actually, one of them, sorry, I'm about, so the question was, what about chicken waste? And chicken waste or chicken manure is actually one of the smelliest manures that's going. I got it my first year I was in my house to put it in my garden. Right by the back door was where this garden was. I never did it again because it's really quite smelly. But chicken waste is actually okay because they don't eat meat. They eat grains and stuff. So it's okay. And in fact, it will add as an accelerant for your compost pile. So by pets, I mean dogs and cats. And okay. This is very basic biology. What composting does is it gives all of these little microscopic animals food. The bacteria and other microbes and fungi and protozoa, and then getting bigger, the springtails and mites and small insects, they all benefit by your composting. And what they do is they take your raw materials and they help to break them down. And so those little microbes and the protozoa, when you throw in some eggshells, if they're tiny little things, they can't do anything with that white globe. But if you scrunch it up into small pieces, you don't have to really scrunch it up, but just break it up so that there are lots and lots and lots of edges for these microorganisms to grab hold of. And as I said, earthworms are kind of the last bastion. And so if your compost pile is working well, you're going to have a nice, rich, brown soil that the earthworms just love. And they digest it. And that's what helps to break down the raw materials into what then becomes soil, actually. Carbon and nitrogen are the basic needs for any living being. And so they need it as much as we do. And carbon in leaves and woody provides them energy. The nitrogen provides the raw material for the proteins and nucleic acids that help them develop. So they need both of these things. Now, everything does have a ratio of carbon to nitrogen. If you're composting, you want to aim for a 30-to-1 ratio, which gives the best environment for these wee beasties to flourish and do your work for you. And what you can think of the 30-to-1 is basically a ratio of brown to green material. And I'm going to go through a table that will help you visualize what that means. And so you're basically adding or mixing various types of stuff together. And this gives you an idea. So if it's really woody, very, very woody, it's got a high carbon ratio. So when you cut down a dead tree, that's very, very high in carbon. There's very little nitrogen left in it. Straw has an 80-to-1. So it's got some nitrogen left, but it's still very high in carbon. Corn stalks, I love them for decorations, but they are mostly carbon left. And the leaves that you rake up in the fall, those are 50-to-1. So there's still a lot of brown going for it. And you can think about it in terms of color. That's why we say brown to green, because wood looks brownish. It's tan. It's even though the leaves have lovely colors of reds and yellows, and that they're shades of brown, if you will. And when they finally lose all their color, they turn brown. On the other hand, what you have in your kitchen, fruit wastes, are almost a perfect mix, which is kind of neat, because if that's all you're composting, you've got a perfect ratio. And that's because you've got things like banana peels that are going to be closer to the brown, and you're going to have maybe an apple core, which is going to have some green left in it or nitrogen in it. So it's a nice mix. And so you can literally just have a compost pile with kitchen waste, and it'll work. Manures are getting closer to the nitrogen side, and you can kind of understand that because they're living. It's the result of living organisms. Food waste is different from fruit wastes and grass clippings. Now I don't know why I don't change this slide. I don't want you to use grass clippings, so I shouldn't have it on the slide. But I give the talk and I go, oh, I should change that. And then of course I go home and I don't change it because I'm not giving the talk for another year. And alfalfa hay is the one that's closest to being still very green and having a lot of nitrogen. Okay, what is going to contribute to your having a fast or a slow composting heap is if you've got small pieces, that's going to be digested easier and quicker. If you've got a big pile, you're going to get the heat from they heat up because the microorganisms get really, really happy and they're really working, and it actually does heat up the pile, and that's what you want. The heat helps the organisms to do it. So bigger is better, and the smaller the size of the debris, the better. Now, what we want, and you can understand this, that every life on Earth needs water and air to sustain itself. And in fact, 50% of any good soil is water and air. Whole 50% of it is water and air. The rest is solid stuff. And that sounds kind of weird, but because you think of Earth as being compacted. But if you've got good soil, you've got 50% of it is air and water. And so what you want in your compost pile is is air passages throughout that will help to feed and nourish and sustain your microorganisms. You want your compost pile to be kind of moist. If it dries out, it's not going to work. It has to have water in it. As I said, large piles are better because they can get hotter, but the maximum size for a home use would be a 5 by 5. Anything bigger than that, it can either get too hot or it's too big to actually heat up. So it's the best. And temperature, when I first started giving this talk, we had a fellow by the name of Randy Zondag, who was our coordinator at the time. And he said, "Oh, you're giving a compost talk." He said, "Here, take this, you can show it to them." He pulled out this thermometer that I swear was that long. And it looked deadly because it had this long spike, which had a point at the end of it. And I could just imagine just using it as a weapon. But it was so it could get down inside a 5 by 5 compost pile to see what the temperature was. And if you were really serious and had lots and lots of piles like this, then you might want to have something like that to determine just how hot it's getting. There's something about temperature for living organisms. If it gets too hot, they shut down. If it gets too cold, they shut down. Now with microorganisms, anything over 160, and they're probably going to die on you. But in general, if you've got plants outside that are growing and it goes below 50, they're just going to go dormant. All the pests are going to go dormant. Once it hits above 50, the garden starts growing and getting happy and doing all sorts of things. It hits 90 degrees. I know I feel, I kind of fold when it gets that hot. Well, so do all the other plants. They go dormant. They won't grow. So there's a temperature threshold for a lot of living things that we need to pay attention to. And with composting piles, because this is a living organism, believe it or not, if it goes higher than 160, it's going to burn out. If it goes under 140, it's not going to decompose, at least not as fast. It can be problematic in summer, but we'll talk a little bit about the need for sun when it comes to composting in a bit. So I'm going to give you a recommended recipe, and then I'm going to talk about all the other ways you do it, which you don't have to pay attention to this. But this is the prescribed one from OSU, and so that's what I teach. I teach OSU stuff, research-based stuff. So this is the recommended recipe. First, you get the grass off of the spot you want to put your compost pile. Why? Why do I take away the grass? Moisture is a good answer, but there's an even better one. You think about it's really a trick question, I guess. All of the microbes and other things that are going to start working in your compost pile are in the earth. If you leave the grass on top, they can't get to you. They can't get to your pile. Or they will maybe after the pile kind of kills off the sod that was under there. But if you break it down, cut it down to the dirt level, then all of those microorganisms are going to go, oh, whoopee, more food, good food. So it allows the soil direct contact with those microorganisms. What you want to do, that first layer, and really this, even though I say you don't have to follow this religiously, it is a good idea to have a base that is some of that brush, the big pieces when you trim a tree or something, you've got a couple of limbs, put those down first. That lets the air get in from the bottom and move up through the pile, so it helps those microorganisms to breathe and to digest the good stuff you're giving them. The second layer is going to be anything. It can be kitchen scraps, it can be leaves. God, I've got grass clippings in there again, ignore that. Materials should be kind of sponge damp, but think about, well, when you just peeled some carrots and some potatoes and you're making a stew and you've got all of these leftovers from your veggies, they're going to be kind of moist anyway, right? So you don't have to worry about it. You want it to be kitchen moist, if you will. And then you add a little more soil because you're giving the microorganisms some friends to play with. Okay, so you've got the layer of soil, you've got something, a lot of brown, and then you're putting a lot of green, and then you're putting soil. And so you're building this ratio of brown to green with the soil to inoculate the compost pile. The fourth layer, this is optional. Some forms of manure, as long as it's aged. Sorry. If it's aged, you do not want to go up to the fairgrounds and go to their bin where they just offloaded the droppings from the horses that day. You don't use that. You've got to have manure that is aged a year, but that will help to provide the nitrogen that the organisms need. But it's optional, but you could, and that's where you could put your chicken stuff. You don't want to put too much in because that's going to attract flies. And it's not the flies that you want, it's those little microorganisms that you want. If the manure is dry, and it might be with the chicken, you can add a little water to help it get going. And there's an example of using a combination of fertilizer with poultry manure. So, and then you just keep repeating those layers until you get however big a pile you want. If you want a 5 by 5, you just keep adding layers until you get to 5 foot, which would be about here. And I've never had one that big, ever. Okay. What you want to do if you do have a huge pile is scoop out a little bit of a kind of a bowl in the top, because that allows water to be collected. Because remember, air and water, these microorganisms want is the oil and the water and the air. So if you've made it right and you've got one of those huge thermometers, it should hit about 140 degrees, and that means it's working. Because once it's warm, and you can actually just kind of put your hand near it and you can sense the heat from it. And that's just because all those organisms are doing their job and having fun and eating and giving off their waste and just having a blast. And then you'll notice that once the pile starts working, it's going to start collapsing and getting shorter. And that means we're going to recommend that you turn it, but you can also just continue to add to it and build it back up again. Okay, if you've got a pile, and it's just as we described, and you're going to get a pitchfork if you've got one, or a good shovel, but a pitchfork works better because it loosens things up. And you're going to flip it over into another pile. And then you're going to start a new one over here where you were. And so you're going to just keep turning it and mixing it up, if you will, and getting the more air in there. And so, and if it's dried out because the outer is going to be drier, you might need to add water. But you're going to do this flipping 2 or 3 times. And then within 3 to 4 months, you've got black gold, what they call black gold. You'll have your compost and you can start using it. I love the description. It's ready to use when it's dark brown, crumbly, and earth smelling. It looks like dirt. Oh, I'm not supposed to use dirt. It looks like soil. That's what you're making, is you're making fresh soil from other ingredients. And you use it just like soil. You can sift the compost to get the big chunks out and use it as a germinating medium for new seeds and the like. But you want to let it just, after you've sieved it, you want to let it settle for a while so that there's nothing raw left in it to burn the seeds. And you probably, if you're going to use it for seedlings, it can't be really, really fresh compost. You want it to be aged compost. I love to, especially, this is why my carrots grew down instead of up after a couple of years, is because I added compost into the soil before I planted my carrots. And they were quite happy because they could then get their feet down to where they were supposed to be, and I didn't have all these green tops. So, you can put it around your plants in the fall as mulch if you want, or you can work it into the soil. It depends on how much you need. If you've got really good soil because you've been doing it for years, then you just need to leave it on the top. But if you want to improve clay or sand soil, you're going to want to dig it in a bit so that it can start improving the soil and turn it into something more like loam. There's something called mulch gardening, and if you keep the organic matter towards the top, it's like mulch, only better. It will keep the weeds down as long as you don't have any weed seeds in your mulch or your compost. It'll work as a mulch and it'll keep the weeds down and it'll enrich the soil at the same time. And you can work with compost that isn't completely broken down if you use it this way. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a different way of composting that incorporates that idea. Okay. If your compost stinks, it doesn't have enough air. So you're going to want to turn it, and you might need to add dry material to it, some leaves, some small twigs, brush of some sort. And I think this is in your handout on the back page. If your pile is dry, gee, surprise, it probably means you don't have enough water. What do? Add water. Not too hard to figure out. Your compost is damp and only warm in the middle. It might be too small a pile, and so you want to add to it. And if it, with mine, and I'll describe mine in a little bit, it tends to flatten out, and so it doesn't have that bulk in the middle that allows the compost to heat up. And sometimes I've got another, I'll give you an example down the road again, but if something is damp and it's sweet smelling, it probably doesn't have enough nitrogen. That probably means it's mostly brown stuff, and you better start adding some green stuff in it to sweeten it up. And I've got grass clippings in there again. Boy, I need to change this. All right, how can you do it? Well, gee, you can take old snow fencing, you can turn it into a cone, a circle, and dump the stuff in there. It keeps it from falling down like mine does. And so it keeps the height, the density what it needs to be. You can just, if you have leftover bricks, you can build something that keeps it contained. Wire, pallets. Pallets are kind of fun because you can put one of the pallets on the ground. So it allows the air to circulate. It's close to the ground because you've taken the grass away. So the microorganisms can get in there, but it also allows air to circulate at the bottom of it. And you don't have to worry about it because you know it's got air pockets. If you've got a turning bin, which was the last one on the other one, this allows you to take your starter bin, turn it into your middle bin, start a new batch, and then when you're 3 to 4 weeks, then you turn that middle one into the last one, take the first one into the second one, and start another one. And by the time you've done that, so you've done, it's about 3 months down the road, you've got good compost in that last bin. And that's usable in your gardens, in your plants, around your plants, whatever. These, I feel compelled to tell you about them because they're on the market. I also feel compelled to tell you that I've never gotten mine to work. It's always moist and never seems to do anything with all the good stuff I put in it. And I'm putting a whole lot of nitrogen-based stuff in it. And so I don't know why it won't do what it's supposed to do. It might have something to do with it being cold out there and I didn't feel like to turn it, but who knows. But if you've got an old 30-gallon drum with a locking lid, take a drill and put holes all the way around it. Then you can start dumping your stuff in there. And then when it's time to turn it, this is the neat part. You flip it over and then you kick it. And you kick it and let it roll, okay? And while you're kicking it, you're getting your frustrations out and you're mixing up your compost. That is the one form of composting that worked the best for me. Unfortunately, by the time I kicked the sucker for a couple of 3 years, it just gave up the ghost and said, I can't stay together for you anymore, girl. I just can't. So, but you can make your own, and it does work, and it's a lot of fun, and it really does, you know, if nothing's going right that day, it's the day to turn your compost, because you can kick that bucket. This is what I do after all is said and done. I have a heap in my back, behind my garage. Nobody bothers it. Nobody sees it. I don't have to worry about complaints from the neighbors. It doesn't smell. It doesn't draw nasty animals. It doesn't do anything except become compost. And because there's a fence, a garage, a fence, and my pile. And it works. And I just, when I'm ready to use it, that's when I decide to turn it, because I turn it over, and then I have all this great stuff at the bottom, which is absolutely pure gold. And then after I've added to this part that I have just turned over, then I flip it back, and I have good gold stuff under here. So I just kind of do it back and forth. I don't have the luxury of the 3 bins, but if I fork it one way, I get good stuff. I fork it back, got good stuff, and I just keep doing that. I've been doing it for, oh Lordy, 40 years, and it still works. The other thing you can do, and this is if you don't have much or you want to give your kids something fun to do, dig a hole and put it in the hole and cover it up. You can, in your vegetable garden, you can trench down between the rows, put your kitchen scraps in there, cover it up, and by the time you're ready to harvest, you won't even know those things were there. It will have been broken down. It works awfully fast when it's got surrounded by all those microorganisms because it's in a trench. It's been covered by dirt, which is where they live. And so it breaks it down real fast. But kids love to dig a hole in their backyard and drop their apple core in there and know that they're helping mom. And it gets rid of the apple core instead of tossing it so that the stupid squirrels can take it somewhere. But it's a fun way of doing things, especially if you don't have a whole lot. This is a good way of doing it. So why do you do it? Because it helps the environment. It saves you money. It's going to improve your soil. And that's about all I have to tell you about composting. Any questions? Yes. What's the problem with the soft horse manure? Actually, the question was why can't you use hot manure or hot horse manure? Is because it has too many chemicals that destroy what you're trying to build. It's going to have the meat juices it's going to have the digestive juices that are going to interrupt the compost mechanisms. But so you allow the microbes to work on that first until it's cured. Okay, it's got to be cured first. Another related thing, if you have a tree taken down in your yard and you have them grind the stump and you think you've got great mulch, you've got hot mulch and it'll burn the plants. It'll burn the plant roots. And that's what you want to avoid doing, is creating something that's going to burn the roots. And so you can use, it's great material for mulch. You've just got to let it age for a year. And then, and you don't figure, well, now I can just plant in there. You can't, because it's raw wood. It's very caustic, and as is manure, and the manure is caustic until it's had a chance to age and break down. About a year. Yeah, they recommend a year. Okay. Any other questions? Because what they're made out of is not useful to the microorganisms. It's not food for them. The green stuff and the plant materials is food for microorganisms. Meat products is not food for microorganisms, and so it's not useful and it can be harmful to. Anything else? The question was about your Christmas kitchen scraps. If you, how soon can you use them? When my bucket is full in the kitchen, I dump it on my compost pile. And if you don't do it soon enough, it's going to start doing it in your bucket, because it wants to, You don't know you've got those microorganisms in your house, but you do, and they start working on that stuff. And so no, as soon as, just anytime you want to put it out there, you can't use it in your garden until it's broken down, unless you trench it in like I described. But no, I collect it, and when I'm lazy, I put it in my slop sink, and when I have 2 or 3 bags, then I dump it outside. But it's cold out there. But the other thing, I was going to talk about sun. People usually ask me, what if I don't have a place in the sun where I can do this? You don't have to. It doesn't require sun for warmth. And it doesn't require sun, which we don't get in the wintertime in Northeast Ohio. It doesn't need it. It will break down as long as the microorganisms can stay inside that pile where it's nice and warm, and they're going to work on it. But I described where mine is. It's behind the garage. By the time the sun comes around the garage, it's stopped by the fence. So mine very rarely sees any kind of, or any length of time of sun when we have sun. But it works, been working for 40 years. So I'm using it for 40 years. Anything else? Yes. Absolutely. The question was, can you put used coffee grounds? Oh, no. I put it in the compost pile. You want it broken down. Don't put it on your plants. I know there's something going around, because I got that question before when I was talking about houseplants, about putting raw coffee grounds around your plants. It's always best to put materials that have been broken down around your plants, because if nothing else, a fully composted soil material has all sorts of nutrients in it. Coffee grounds don't, until they've been broken down and incorporated with all of those other wonderful good things that you're going to put in your compost pile. It doesn't have any of the extra nutrients. That's what you're doing with the composting, is you're creating a soil amendment that has lots and lots of nutrients that the plants need. And coffee grounds, they're coffee grounds. They don't have any inherent nutrition in them. I mean, they're great for waking you up in the morning when they're in a coffee cup, but no. Anything else? Well, thank you for your time, and I've appreciated your attention, and for you coming out in this lovely weather. This is, again, information about hotline. And I know where the old building is. So the new building, is it located like across the street where all those buildings are? Or? It's right, you know where the square in Painesville is? You know where the gazebo is and the like? The Lake County offices where you vote? We're on the 4th floor in that building. Yeah. Yes, it is. Yep. Yep. And I had forgotten I'd had this included. This is an excellent thing to know about. If you're going to search for researched information, in other words, it's not somebody's grandfather who's given you this information. It's not my grandmother. It's really a research-based information. If you put, before you start your search, in your search bar, if you type site:/edu space and then put in whatever you want. So you could put in magnolias. You could put in Christmas trees. You can put whatever you want. And what will come up is all information that was determined to be accurate via research in colleges and universities. That's what the EDU does. It brings in information that comes from all universities and colleges. Okay, thank you.